Well, hi there, everyone. It's Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, aka the best teeth in the game. And it's time for another Let's Argue, where I hop online, I accept your hot takes, unpopular opinions, and tough questions, and I answer the best ones in this segment. Let's go. Your review on Kamikaze was heavily influenced by your emotions because he called out music critics and poor Melon was hurt. Who gives a flying Frank Zappa what Eminem thinks about what other people think about his music? A great deal of his new album is just him acting out of being upset over what people said about his music, and yet Eminem and his fans are just acting like, no, you're the ones that are hurt. You're the ones that are upset. It's one of the most childish album rollouts and fan reactions I've really ever been subject to since I started this channel. Like, the way that Eminem fans have been desperately coming to his defense and this new album's defense is even sillier than some of the most ridiculous responses I've gotten to even my Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy review, honestly. Chance the Rapper is a better public figure than a rapper. Chance the public figure doesn't really roll off the tongue quite as well. You avoid reviewing Christian music even though there are quality hip-hop albums from artists like Trip Lee and Lecrae. I do not avoid reviewing music on my channel that Christians have made. A lot of artists that I've covered are Christian. They sing about God. Sometimes God and their religion play kind of a central role to the entire record or a pivotal moment in the storyline of the record, or some songs on the album. Big Crit and Kendrick Lamar are shining examples. But if what you're saying is that I don't consciously review music that is typically categorized genre-wise as Christian music, you're right. And that's mostly because I think forming an entire genre around forcing your Bronze Age belief system down other people's throats is stupid. And sure, while I do have a distaste for religion in general, I don't feel like my opinion here is specific to Christianity. If you came out with a genre tomorrow called, I don't know, vegan straight edge hip hop, and every song and every album was basically hip hop music about being vegan and straight edge, while, yeah, there are tenets to that belief system I believe in and apply to my own life, pretty much every album in that genre would most likely suck balls. Because while I do love music that addresses ideas and concepts and topics, to have the entirety of your catalog revolve around one central idea, especially when that idea is based more on faith than it is facts, you're going to run into a brick wall at some point, and it's no longer going to be about the music and entertaining people, but instead just continually reaffirming in your listener base that, yes, you believe this is what we believe, this is what we think, don't we all think and believe this? And for anyone who's on the outside of that, for anyone who's not down with the clown, that's going to become a boring pill to swallow, especially when the artists who you're referencing here are not really the most top-notch rappers on the planet. And keep in mind, this is nothing against Christian music in general or Christian artists either, as I have given plenty of positive reviews to artists who have a Christian faith, and they have explored that faith in their music in a really interesting way. And I also have nothing against Christian music in general, because music of faith and worship, like gospel music and old school, very archaic Christian music, can be pretty fantastic as well, which I have enjoyed personally. But when your message of indoctrination within a certain genre of popular music is so strong that it needs to be couched into a subgenre of that genre, I feel like you've lost me. So that's what I think. Allison Chains Unplugged is the best Unplugged ever, period. I'm not gonna argue with you on that. I'm just gonna give you a kiss. Musical theater like Hamilton is classist because you need to drop hundreds of dollars on tickets if you're lucky, and also be in a major city to see it in its intended format. Would making shows available on video really be too much to ask? While I see the point that you're making here, I also feel like this is naturally what is going to happen when something that is limited becomes insanely popular. Because in order to have the Hamilton experience, you need to be there in the theater seat, seeing it right in front of you, and there are only so many seats in so many theaters with so many performances, and with so many people wanting to see it, the ticket prices are inevitably going to rise. It's supply and demand. I wouldn't say that's as classist as much as it is that's what happens when a lot of people want a limited amount of a thing. Maybe the government can equally distribute tickets to Hamilton and basically socialize the whole theater industry. But really though, Hamilton is at a peak of relevancy right now. A lot of people like it, a lot of people love it, and eventually when demand to see it in person kind of dies down, I'm sure there will be incentive to put it out on video or some kind of compatible format that people can enjoy at home, because they will, of course, want to continue making money off of it. I don't know if Lin-Manuel has made some kind of open statement about not putting it on video, so on and so forth. I mean, most major musical theater productions that are classic and insanely popular do have some kind of video or media release at some point that people can enjoy outside of the context of the theater, so I guess that may happen eventually. Courtney Love's Hole is the most overlooked grunge band ever. Grunge is about expressing anger and angst, but while Cobain's anger made him passionate, cool, and sexy, Love's anger made her crazy, emasculating, and bitter despite their music being of similar quality. I think maybe what you're trying to say here is that they're more underrated than overlooked, because honestly, when people talk about grunge, I hear Hole brought up quite often. I mean, they're one of the few bands that had a very strong and loud female spirit and had quite a bit of visibility. But were the albums as classic, were the hits as large in number than many of the other artists in the big four of grunge? No, absolutely not. I mean, look, I think Hole has quite a bit of cred in the grunge scene, honestly. I think there may be some people who hate and are bitter toward Courtney Love for stupid reasons. I think a lot of people see Live Through This as a classic, but honestly, like, there aren't enough people talking about Mudhoney. Aren't enough people talking about L7. So I don't know if Hole is really as overlooked as you're insinuating there. I think they're a solid B-tier grunge band, which is not a bad thing. You could easily be a D-tier. Animal Collective is just Rugrats backing music with vocals. I think Mark Mothersbaugh would be very, very flattered to hear that. Very flattered to hear that. Most albums nowadays don't have a dedicated listening order, and deducting points for flow between tracks is undeserved. Okay, so what you're saying is that I should not deduct points because the artist blatantly ignored a characteristic of the album building experience. So if somewhere along the process of making an album, the artist and their producers just forgot to totally fucking EQ and mix the whole thing, then I can't deduct any points for it sounding like shit, because they didn't even bother to EQ it. How can you deduct points for just not EQing it? They didn't even try. Yeah, just forgetting or ignoring an essential part of the album building process doesn't mean that you just automatically get a pass on it or that it doesn't factor in whatsoever. Instant classics are a myth. Only time can tell whether or not an album is or isn't. Yeah, pretty much the case. It's called classic for a reason. It becomes classic after it has withstood the test of time and people still want to listen to it after a while. I know that in the internet age, a while is like 2 years, but honestly, that's still not enough time to tell whether or not an artist or an album has influence, and even carries over onto the next generation too, which are a few characteristics that, in my opinion, you could say make a record classic. Tiger's Jaw version of Gypsy is better than Fleetwood Mac's. I miss Tuesdays with Tay. I just miss Tuesdays with Tay.
What's up?
When is it gonna come back?
Fantano.
Marijuana makes music a more enjoyable experience than it already is. I mean, maybe it does. I can't say personally. I have seen lots of instances, though, of marijuana making people think some really bad music is good. So there is that. Nu metal actually did a lot of great things and produced some of the most interesting and important metal bands of all time. Slipknot, Korn, Deftones, System of a Down, etc. It also proved a mainstream audience can get into heavy music if exposed to it. Yes, 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 and yes, but look at the sacrifices the genre had to make to get that mainstream audience. You're essentially talking about metal bands boiling their sound, their style, and their formulas down to the point where the songwriting and the playing are really dumb and rudimentary. Sure, there are notable exceptions of groundbreaking talent and virtuosity and cutting-edge style, some of which you have listed here, but a great deal of the bands in the nu metal scene were all kind of chasing after the trends that a lot of the groundbreaking bands in the genre set at the style's inception. Like, how else do you explain the existence of bands like Mudvayne, which just basically sound like a bad hybrid of Slipknot and Korn? Bling Rap is seen as a meme, but it was actually such a lively and influential era. The current rap emo wave is making everyone depressed and cracked out, when we all used to be fawning over some apple-bottom jeans and boots with the fur. I think this is a kind of fun and enlightening take on the Bling era. I mean, I won't deny that the Bling era was definitely more lively. It was definitely more upbeat. It seemed like there was, I guess, more to celebrate. But I don't know, in a lot of respects, it was very one-dimensional. It was very copy and paste. It was very masculine, very macho. I mean, you have to consider that Kanye West wearing a pink polo and backpacks was weird at that time. And as a result, there was a lot of boring, meat-headed shit going on in the Bling scene that was totally not deserving of the praise that it received. Like, people were looking at 50 Cent like it was a fucking god walking amongst us, and it just wasn't the case. Guy's always been a so-so rapper. I'm not going to get into another 50 Cent rant in another episode of Let's Argue. But here's a funny picture that Lush did of him with all of Tekashi 6ix9ine's tattoos. Mineral is the greatest emo band of all time, says Emo Ben Shapiro. Not true. That is in fact Cap and Jazz, and facts don't care about your feelings, Benny boy. The British rock invasion of the 1960s was one of the 5 most important events to happen in the history of the USA. The impacts this movement had on the nation were profound culturally, and not only shaped modern music, but helped shape modern society as well. Yeah, but a couple of things. I mean, a lot of those groups, it's not like they came in a vacuum with sounds and ideas that were totally alien to American music listening audiences, as a lot of what they were doing was based off of the rock and roll in America of the 1950s and 60s. And it's not like America during this time was without its teenage music, its revolutionary music, its own rock and roll music, and its own groundbreaking rock artists, which were super significant. Look at Hendrix, look at Dylan, look at the world-class Wrecking Crew and all the records that they played on over the years, fucking Beach Boys, surf rock. We had plenty of great psych bands over here, though I will agree that British bands like The Who and the Beatles and Kinks and so on and so forth did speak to a newfound liberation and a rejection of traditional values that were just emblematic of the 1960s, of hippie culture. Arguing over music is actually bad because in the end, we're all wrong. I like the sentiment you're putting forth here in that a lot of what we're talking about, really as we go back and forth, is pretty much subjective. I do think there are objective elements of music and art and creativity, but a lot of the enjoyment, it does come down to your own personal taste. However, I personally feel like that's part of what makes the discussion and the back and forth so exciting, because if there was a definitive and very obvious way of deciding what's right, what's wrong, what's good or bad, chances are we wouldn't have all that much diversity in art and music, as whatever was objectively good is what everybody would be doing, and there would be no reason to talk or discuss any of it because no one would need to come to any conclusion as to what's good or bad, because it would all be objective, it would all be obvious. You would essentially just need to read a rule book or a list of the perfect albums, the right albums, the albums that made the correct choices as to what they needed to employ to make that objectively good music, and then that would be that. You know, I think it's fun and entertaining and interesting that art has imperfections, or that there are lots of gray areas in art. So it can expand your mind, it can create discussion, it can cause you to think about what you do and don't enjoy in different ways. It's a flaw as a music critic to ignore certain music because you don't personally have a taste for it, i.e. your dislike of sleepy music. The fuck does that mean? It's not even a genre. There's a lot of important music that has this quality, and it seems like as one of the most popular reviewers, you should be more objective. What the hell are you saying? What the hell is sleepy music? Like, I could say that genres like dream pop are sleepy, and I review dream pop. I've given some dream pop records some super positive reviews. I mean, certainly there are albums out there that have sleepy qualities that maybe I dislike, but maybe there are others that have sleepy qualities that I enjoy. Like the way that you're talking here, it would imply that you're pointing out that I'm ignoring some kind of musical movement or something that's like hugely influential or groundbreaking, but you just said sleepy music. Sleepy music is not a genre. There are multiple genres of music that could have sleepy qualities to them. You can make a sleepy rock album. You can make a sleepy hip-hop record. You can make a sleepy ambient album. You can make a sleepy jazz record. What the hell does this mean? Sure, there are genres of music out there that I don't really have a taste for. Let's say classical music, for example. Yeah, I don't review a whole lot of classical music because I don't personally feel like I have very strong bearings in the genre. And, yeah, I don't know. I've just kind of accepted that. I don't give a shit. I review the music that I review because I want to review it. I'm not a fucking machine. I'm not a monkey dancing around in a cage for you. Just like, review this album, review this album, review this genre. Make sure you're reviewing this genre, okay? Or else if you're not, then it just means you're not being a good music critic. Shame, shame, shame on you. Shame on you. No, bitch. This is my channel. These are my videos. I make the content I want to make. Go listen to some sleepy music. The best genre of music. I'm gonna leave it at that, guys. This has been another episode of Let's Argue. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this episode wasn't too sleepy. Over here next to my head is another episode of the show that you can watch. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Sleep the knee, sleep Tano forever.